today we are going to be talking about entertainment and certain points of history. Now, what comes to mind when you usually think about entertainment? Maybe TV and movies, or like in my case, my Xbox 360. But nobody really thinks about theater or what happened during the medieval times for entertainment. So let's take a moment and look at a few images of what people think the medieval times are like. You're supposed to Hopefully those pictures gave you a good laugh or smile. But when in reality, during the medieval times, people with disability were used as entertainment. And the treatment of these people who were disabled varied. I mean, the people had disabilities from being blind, deaf, dwarfs, to other things. It could be mental or physical. Hopefully those images gave you a couple of good laughs or smiles. But when in reality, during the medieval times, people with disabilities were used as entertainment. And the treatment of them varied, and their disabilities also varied from being blind, deaf, to dwarfs, and other physical and mental disabilities. Now let's talk about why these disabled people, their treatment varied. It was based on the beliefs during the medieval period. People thought that people with disabilities were either being punished for a sin or that they were facing purgatory on earth instead of after death. It was common during this period for people who were disabled to be associated with evil and witchcraft. And this is why they were subject to superstition, persecution, and rejection. While some of these individuals who had disabilities were able to find work and had support from friends and family, others did not. While monasteries and convents cared for other individuals with disabilities that had nothing, the individuals had no other options. They would have to resort to being town beggars or being exploited. These mental and physical impairments were used as amusement and ridicule during the medieval period. These mental and physical impairments were targeted for amusement and ridicule during the medieval period. Disabled people during the medieval era were found performing in exhibitions that spread to America through circuses and museums and other areas, but also as well as modern day inclusion during theater. As you can see, I have changed locations. There's a very good reason for this that I will be explaining in a little bit, but not quite yet. It is actually a zoo, if you want to get a good look. Now let's talk about where these exhibitions of disabled people occurred during medieval England. Now let's talk about where these exhibitions of disabled people occurred during the medieval period. These shows happen at medieval fairs, royal courts, and among itinerant entertainment troupes. The medieval fairs were held in village greens, open lands, or within the town. The point of these fairs was for trade and commerce. To draw attention to these fairs, entertainment was usually accompanied by singers, acrobats, musicians, and fools. These fools were both naturally and artificially cognitively diminished. People who were physically and mentally diminished and disabled were actually used for money during these fairs. At these fairs, people who were mentally and physically disabled were displayed for money. Even peasant parents display their infants that have birth deformities for money at these fairs. Royal courts and noble class also enjoyed the entertainment of disabled people. And usually they would have a jester. Now this jester could be a dwarf or some other physical deformity. Disabled performers traveled along with itinerant groups that toured places to give performances in forms of singing and acting. Let's talk about why I'm in front of the zoo. Many people feel that it's inhumane to have animals in cages, as you see. How would you feel if I told you that they put humans in cages at one point? They actually called these cages idiot cages. And now we're going to kind of move away so you could probably hear me better throughout the rest of this. Hopefully now you can hear me a little better. So these idiot cages I was talking about were placed in the center of town for the people to be exploited. And unfortunately, this action from the medieval period would lead to what are known as freak shows today. The medieval era set the framework for America in the 1800s to display people with disabilities. People who were considered oddities held the curiosity of many Americans and mainstreamed America. With the emergence of science, unseen animals were brought to America, such as giraffes and elephants. With this piqued interest in animals, some scientists started opening up private museums. And in these private museums, they hosted human oddities, like conjoined twins. At the end of the 18th century, all major American cities had at least one of these museums. After the burning down of P.T. Barnum's Scientific Museum in New York that held many extravagant human exodities, some of which, I have to add in, were actually faked. After the burning down of P.T. Barnum's Science Museum in New York, which held many human oddities, some of which were fabricated stories, he decided to take his show on the road. He called it P.T. Barnum's Grand Traveling Museum. This is very similar to what they did in the medieval times when they would travel from town to town. Some disabled performers performed in the circus, but they were housed in a tent, which brought in additional money. And this is where the term sideshow came from. But this wasn't limited to just people who were disabled. There were people who had strange talents, such as fire eating and sword swallowing, as well as different ethnicities that performed. Unfortunately, many were exploited and abused. And this continued because America found amusement in it. Although with scientific knowledge on the rise pertaining to disabilities, people stopped seeing these individuals as less than others, and there were some cures formed for it. Now, moving on beyond that, in this modern era of entertainment, people with disabilities are included in theaters now, such as large theater companies. A couple of examples: Theaters Breaking Through Barriers and the Blue Apple Theater. Now, even though in history what happened to people with disabilities is horrible and they were exploited, in today's society they are inclusive, such as large theater companies known as Theaters Breaking Through Barriers and the Blue Apple Theater. Now, what happened to people with disabilities in history is terrible, and they were exploited. In today's society, they are included. On that note, this concludes my TED Talk on entertainment during periods of history, and thank you for watching.